everybody. Hope you're doing marvelously well. I'm very excited to talk to Mr. Matt Good. Matt is incredibly talented, a guitar player, a composer, a producer, an engineer, and a mixer. And he has kindly done a breakdown of the song that we have for the mix competition, an album he mixed by Dragged Under. So, Matt, how are you today?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Give me a little bit of background on your career. Well, you were born in Rhode Island and moved to Florida at 13. How did you get into music? What was your journey?
Oh, God.
Loaded question. Big one.
Yeah. Well, I started getting into it around fourth grade. I had a friend. He was like this rich kid and he had CDs. And I was like, whoa, it was kind of wild back then. It sounds crazy now, but trust me, it was wild back then. And he showed me like Green Day and Offspring and some other stuff. And then when I moved, in Rhode Island, before I moved to Florida, I had these upstairs neighbors. They were like metalhead, like typical like Airheads, the movie metalhead guys. And I started talking to them one day around fourth or fifth grade. And they started having me come up there and they would just like give me so much music, like everything from Zeppelin and Nirvana to like weird metal I'd never heard of, Rage Against the Machine, Tool, Filter, like you name it, like all these great things that are happening in the 90s. And they basically like turned me into like a little rock and roll metalhead kid. And then, basically when I heard Nirvana, I think that was the day I decided on to play guitar for sure. And I remember I used to like look through like, they used to sell these like mall catalogs, like Sears and stuff, JCPenney. And they had like these knockoff Fender Stratocasters in there. And I used to like cut them out and hang them up because I wanted one so bad because of Kurt Cobain. And I was just like obsessed with it. And then I finally got a guitar and I just started playing. I kept listening to music and,
Do you remember what your first guitar was?
Yeah, I do. It was given to me by someone that my mom was friends with and it was broken, but it was made by a company called Hagstrom.
Oh yeah, I remember Hagstrom.
Yeah, I had like this weird tin foil like around the pickups underneath the strings there, or not tin foil, but it looked like foil. It was really strange, but it was broken. It didn't work with an amp, but I played it for a year probably
before you had an amp.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, that's crazy. What do you use now? What's your axe of choice?
I have three guitars because guitar is pretty vast in style.
Yep.
I have this new Fender Telecaster. It's like this new line that they just made. And it's really cool. It has like this like kind of like hot rodded single coil pickup in the bridge. And it sounds pretty great. And then I have this ESP LTD that my friend Ken, it's his artist signature series. He's in a band called Unearth and he's the Fishman rep. And he made this guitar and it has a Evertune. It has an Evertune bridge. Yep, and the Fishman pickup. So that guitar is really awesome. It has a coil tap for the active passive pickup option and stuff. So it's pretty versatile. It's great for recording when you're doing like choruses with big, power chord guitars. You can just hit the guitar as hard as you want. It's perfectly in tune. Sounds incredible. And then I have this one other guitar that's a Kiesel, and I just use that for just if I'm just in the mood to pick it up. I know.
Fantastic. So quite a slim range of guitars, but you have every guitar has a job, has a purpose. I know a lot of rock guys are playing Kiesels these days. I've played a couple and they're pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. Is that a 7-string or a 6-string?
All 6. I don't do anything more than 6. That's just not who I am.
If you have to go low, you tune down?
Yeah, I actually have a baritone. I guess I forgot to mention that. I have a custom baritone and has an extended scale, reverse headstock and stuff. And I put like a 74 gauge string on that thing.
Wow.
Yeah. I think it's typically in G sharp, like a drop D sharp tuning. But I don't care about what the tuning is. That's never been a circumstance to me. I just don't want to have a bigger neck because it just doesn't feel like comfortable in my hands,
I watch a lot of those guys with like super, probably far more than 7 strings. And I notice they're still spending most of their time on the top 6 strings, the highest 6 strings, sometimes even 4 or 5. So, and occasionally going low. So I suppose it's just having that ability to have it when you need it. But yeah, I agree with you. I've picked up a couple of those guitars and I'm like, I play with my thumb on the back, but I'm like, where do I, you know what I mean? It does feel a little, a little Unusual. So give us a little bit of your career. So I'm going back here. I've got All Music open. You were with from first to last for how long? For it looks like your first album I see credited here was 2004. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean the first real album. We had an EP before that.
Right.
That band I started in high school, and
fantastic.
So I guess if you want, you could say it formed probably in 99.
Great. So you were all friends at high school and started the band together?
Well, yeah, the initial lineup, but then kind of grew out of that, and then, member swaps and stuff like that. So it's kind of like this evolution where the initial concept was formed, and then you'd grow, and then people would be like, oh, life, and you're like, I don't care about life. I'm going to keep going on. And
sure,
you meet other people that are like, yeah, who cares about life? Bills, whatever,
Yeah.
And then you keep finding more of those people, and then it's kind of like you get assembled Power Rangers, whatever. You're good to go.
Power Rangers. So how do I pronounce the DRUGS? Do I call the band Drugs? Was that the whole idea?
Yeah. I guess, yeah. It was really my thing, but I mean, yeah, that was the idea.
That was a great record. That was a really great record. Ryan and I were talking about it before I called you, but just how big a record that was and how great it sounded.
Yeah, I love that record. It was a lot of fun to make that. Also, really, it was a really interesting and crazy experience because, that band was formed by the singer. He kind of just reached out to people from various existing bands and kind of created this super group thing. And so even though I knew pretty much everyone in the band, at a decent level, it was still you're making a record with someone, you're kind of jumping right into getting intimately familiar with them and who they are. And it was really cool, actually. It felt like a reality TV show or something in a lot of ways because of that. But it was great. Record came out great. Working with Feldman, the producer at that time, was really fun and great. And, I still love the record. I think it's awesome.
Did you do it up in LA? Did you do it at his house?
We did it at one of his houses. He moves a lot. I think that one was in Beverly Hills, maybe, or something.
Right.
I can't remember.
I went to his studio a few years ago in his house, but he may have moved it. And I remember the control room was upstairs, and you went downstairs to the live room and everything. So I don't know if it was the same place or not, but
that's the one.
So your evolution, you got production credits quite early on, though, because on the first to last record from 2008, you're credited as producer on that. So was that just a natural thing that was coming in? While you're working on the records, you started feeling like you were bringing a lot to it, that you wanted to, be credited as for production and actually wanted to be a producer? Yeah,
I think it's just one of those things when you start taking on a greater amount of tasks, it starts to feel that's becoming a natural progression.
So what was the first band that you actually were the producer of outside of your own band?
I mean, there was a lot of kind of local startup bands that I kind of worked with, at the beginning of this, because some of those things are I didn't really have any credentials as a producer necessarily, but I did have credentials as a band member and a songwriter. So I think the first 2 years, I'd say I worked with a lot of just people in my area, helping them with their local bands, helping them write, showing them stuff that I had learned, tips and tricks, how to be a better player, how to be a better artist in the studio, etc. And I made a lot of recordings. The first band I worked with on a label was The Word Alive. And I made a record for them. I think it was in 2014. I don't remember now, but it's somewhere around there.
And do you find yourself co-writing with bands as well?
Yeah, I co-write with bands a lot. I think it's just kind of one of those things. When you become a producer, I think you kind of head in a few different directions, but there's probably two pretty prevalent ones, and one of them is you're the guy that's going to make their record and record it, and it's going to sound good, and then you're the guy that really intervenes through the whole process. Really checking and helping with the writing and helping with the other stuff. And I veered towards that direction because it's just kind of inherently who I already was.
You've got the new Asking Alexandria record I see is about to come out. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what was that like?
That band they're some of my really great friends. They actually live, most of them, in Arizona here with me.
Great.
And we did the new record. We did it over the course of a year in different sessions in between touring, just doing songwriting, demoing pre-pro stuff. And then eventually, we came together and just tracked everything. And there's 15 songs on it.
Wow. Are you referencing other things when you're producing and mixing? Or are you really just making the music in the moment for yourself and for the band? Are you, or you're not even thinking that way? You're just making the record?
I think it really just depends. There are some stylistic things that you can do that are going to feel dated no matter what the situation is, unfortunately.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, it's like, that's like something that you kind of like, you deal with in all genres, like pop too. Like you can really tell pop from one era because it was all based on like 128 BPM, like dance music. And now most current pop you hear is mostly based on like, 150 BPM, hip hop, trap music. And like, you can just kind of like follow the surging of different trends in the world through the pop. But like, like with rock too, same thing. Like, there's certain things like from the pop culture world that leak into it production wise. It's inherently going to happen because we're just products of our environment, and like things are going to sound cool to us in the moment. There's really no way of getting around it. The only way I suppose that you can is just by making a record that is absolutely nothing but drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. But even then, I mean, the tones, the guitar tones, the way that the guitars sound, like, if they're ultra scooped, you probably know it's from this time. If they're, if they sound like Marshall plexi heads and they're screaming with 2.5K, it's probably from the 70s or something, like it's just, everything is always going to be dateable depending on how you look at it, I think.
Yeah. So you mixed this track that we're doing as a mix competition of Ryan's band, Dragged Under. The mix is fantastic. I suppose I have a couple of things to ask because, I first asked Ryan about doing this and we talked about it. This was a single, a favorite track. It's apparently the singer wrote it about his girlfriend, so it's an important song. But I was like, well, tell me a bit about the recording. And when he goes, well, firstly, there's no live drums. And I'm like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I suppose I'm hearing that increasingly when it comes to like modern rock in general, that there's less and less live drums going on. Are you finding that's the case with stuff you're getting to mix? Are you finding that with stuff you get to produce? What do you prefer? I suppose it's a big question.
See, that's kind of a loaded question because I feel like there's so many circumstantial things, right?
Of course, and budget, yes.
Budget is obviously a big one, right? I think that like, with a lot of up and coming kids, that fire, that passion, I would hate to see it be extinguished by like the lack of availability to record live drums. And I think that in a lot of cases, if you just have an idea and like you want to like make your mark on the world and like you can circumnavigate that huge obstacle of recording live drums, then, I'm actually about it. I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. Because I think like the average listener, I don't really think that they necessarily care or can tell that much if it's done properly. But I do, like in a perfect world, I think live drums are great because, I mean, you are trying to present a performance, right? I mean, Absolutely. When I listen to a mix in headphones, I do like it to sound like I'm listening to like what I can envision a band playing on a stage would sound like, at least in some capacity. I think like, when you're talking about drum samples, that's a different story. I don't see anything wrong with that. There's multiple reasons, but one of the things about live that I love is just how goddamn loud everything is. So you can't really replicate the feeling of like 110, 20 dB smashing you in the face out of a PA without, somehow lending yourself to get there with like some kind of, auxiliary help, right? So I don't really mind that at all. It's just, I think that, the biggest things you notice, like when you're meticulous, is you notice the cymbals. But there's just ways of getting around it, and you learn as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I have this conversation really often with people. I'll do a video, recording jazz. We've done some stuff with Brent Fisher, and it's like jazz band and minimal miking and everything recorded live. And then I've done other stuff at Sunset Sound where I've recorded a band live off the floor with the vocals. And then I'll do other stuff where it's completely programmed, maybe even gridded with samples and all this kind of stuff. And it's interesting, like everybody will react in a different way. And my argument always is, what is the best thing? What is the genre? What is the song? What are you trying to get? And I feel like our job now, going back to me finding common ground with you as a musician, that's a producer, an engineer, and a mixer, and a songwriter, is like, you have to know everything these days. You have to know how to record a live drum kit, and you also have to know how to mix drums that aren't live and make them sound live, and everything in between. I think that's our job now. And so I always come back when people say, "Oh, I only love John Bonham 3 mics on a drum kit." Heck, I love that sound, but I'm not going to get Metallica wall of sound guitars with 3 mics on a drum kit. Now, don't get me wrong. Many people say, yes, you can. And I keep telling them, well, send me the mix. And strangely not one of them ever has.
It's all situational.
Yeah.
Like a mix, I think of it as like a glass of water or something, like if you fill it up with guitars like 3/4 of the way, there's no room for the drums, Like if you want the 3 mic drum kit, that's a badass sound.
Amazing sound.
You can't have like these epic, out of control, huge tones on top of it. You have to like play to the sound that you create, It's a sound stage and you have to use that.
Thanks ever so much for sharing the stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to play the full mix breakdown that you did for us, which I really, really appreciate. So for those of you out there that have already downloaded the multi-tracks, you can follow along. You can take some tips from Matt. You can see how he did it. But of course, this is a mix competition. You can take some of his ideas. You can apply your own. You can, think his stuff is the best thing ever. I'm sure he'll be happy if you try something completely different. This is going to be a lot of fun. Thanks, Matt. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Please, of course, leave a bunch of comments and questions below. Happy mixing, and we look forward to hearing your incredible mixes.
All right, guys. What's up? My name is Matt Good. I am here in Phoenix, Arizona at my studio, and I'm going to be walking you through my mix of Chelsea by Dragged Under. First thing we're going to do, I'm going to show you what it sounds like at the end of what I had done, and then we're going to go from there.
To me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate apologies, happiness not guaranteed. Trying to make peace with my past, but it's my enemy. Refuse to speak with me.
When I mix a song, first thing I do is I listen to the song. You might be like, well, of course you need to hear the song, but there's a big reason why you need to hear the song. You need to hear what it is that you're going to be working towards. Because a big part of mixing, in my opinion, is figuring out what you think something should sound like. So when you're working towards getting it to what you think that is, you're always on this path to success. You can find yourself making the mistake of not having a clear vision or direction, and it will often lead you down this winding path that brings you nowhere. In my opinion and in my experience, I feel like having a clear vision of what it is that you want something to sound like from the get-go is super important. So with that being said, when I heard this song, I thought, cool, this is a catchy song. It's kind of pop punk. It's kind of rock. It's somewhere in the middle. I think that this is the kind of song where vocals are going to really steer the ship. There's many, many, many times when that is the case. But in this particular song, it's just bass guitar, drums, and vocals. And in a song like this, I feel like, especially because they're catchy vocals, you really want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to make them the star of the show. So my first thought was, okay, since there's not a lot of layers, as I'm going to show you right now. So we have the drums. These are drums. And we have bass. And this is just a DI copied twice, right? And then you have these guitars. And like, honestly, there's only a few of them playing through the whole song. A lot of them are just like little extra overdubs. And then you have your vocals right here. So there's not a lot, right? So you have a lot of space to make every individual instrument big, which is a really fun thing to do when you're mixing, especially lately in music. In my experience, and I'm guilty of it, I do it all the time, I fill everything up with so much content that I feel like you're playing this game of surgery with your EQs, making everything fit together and all this stuff. And although that's really challenging and fun and you get really great stuff out of it, there is something to be said about a song that is minimal in layers and what you can do in this. So basically what we're going to talk about today is what you can do with a song with minimal amounts of layers. So the first thing we do is I want to look at this master fader. I start every mix the same way. I bring in my master fader. I have an SSL compressor. This is a hardware version. I'll show you what it looks like really quick. On the digital version, the plugin, it looks like this. What we'll do is 2-to-1 like that. And then you just adjust the threshold. I actually put my makeup gain down because I like to leave more headroom because it's just kind of how I work. But in this case, you just want it to hit like around here, between 3, 4, somewhere in that area. That's just what I like. I'm not saying you should do that. That's just what I personally like. I think it sounds good there. What happens when you compress your mix too much? Drastically changes all the levels you spend all this time setting, which is, a big reason why I mix with it on the whole time. You can choke it out and make things feel small. It brings out transients to be extra loud and in your face while making the whole mix seem kind of like, I don't know, just like choked. That's the only real word I can use to explain it. So you just want to find that balance between it sounding not boring and sterile, but not overly compressed and choked. Just that nice little middle ground is what you're looking for there. So anyway, first thing I use after my comp is this Pultec. I mean, if you've been recording at all, I'm sure you've heard of this plugin or this hardware. This is the best sounding one I've heard. It's by Apogee. In fact, this one sounds so much better than the other ones. I don't think I'll ever use any of them ever again. This is really just like a little life EQ, we're going to add a little low end, and we're doing the Pultec low end trick, which if you don't know what that is, Google it. But more or less you're boosting and cutting the low end to create like kind of like a hill with a dip. And it's just nice. It's just like a flattering sound, a little high end boost over here. That's it. It's like a little smiley face curve to your mix. This is a Pro Q3. This is doing little tiny bits of dynamic EQ on the mix. And most likely I got to these by listening to the song so much and for so long that these nodes just started to bug out on my ears. This is something that will happen when you've been listening to a song for a really long time. And I'm not going to change them because I still think that the mix sounds good. So I guess I was onto something there, but to try and explain why I did these right now, I don't think I'd be able to. It's just something that you'll hear. Like if there's just a little bit of a buildup, too much buildup in one little spot or something, you can just kind of like taper it a little bit. And I bet if I turned it off, we wouldn't even be able to tell that much. This is a tape emulation plugin by Crane Song. It's called Phoenix. I love this plugin. I cannot really think of a time when I don't think that this sounds good. It's also very powerful, so I definitely try to use it sparingly. As you can see, I'm only using 10 right here. Process is set 10. There's a whole lot of room to go from there, but this is all you need. It's just adding a little bit of vibe. And then lastly, we have this Fusion. I can't pull that up. This is a piece of hardware too. This is made by SSL. That is basically like this little like one-stop shop of effects and a hardware unit. What I'm using is a tiny bit of the input drive. Just adds a little bit of color, harmonic distortion. It's something similar to like, if you're using a desk and you were driving their desk. There's a high frequency compressor that is set to 16K. And it's really not doing much. That is basically kind of doing a very subtle high-end tame of the whole mix. And I feel like 16K and up is where that weird digital kind of shit lives. So I don't know. It just kind of makes it a little bit more pleasant. Once again, I don't know if I turned it on and off, if you would be able to tell that much. You can make it to where you can tell, but that's when I think that it doesn't sound very good. It's like right before you start to really notice it is where I really like it. From there, stereo imaging thing, they have a width knob. I turn it up a little bit. I mean, that's really all there is to it. A lot of this stuff, it's just, it's pretty basic. And lastly, there's a transformer stage, and I turn that on. That is also subtle. All these things are subtle, but what I will say is when you turn it off and on, all those subtle things together are very noticeable. So that is that. That's my master fader. Now that I have that set up, and once again, I want to reiterate, the reason I do that in this stage is because there's a lot of things that happen when you introduce factors like this on your master fader that change the overall mix. If you do a really good job, I mean, a lot of times it'll be okay, but I feel like most of the time you're going to go back and you're going to have to make adjustments as you add things because the compression will change the relationship of levels between instruments. Adding EQ will make it to where a lot of things sound better, like the Pultec, for example, but maybe some will be too boomy in that sense. So my point is that by having all that stuff on, and granted, I know it's kind of hard if you haven't like done it the way I just explained, but I know for a fact that a chain like that, either that or something just like that, it's going to work for my mix style. That's a trial and error thing. Is something that I've figured out over a long time. Once you get to the point where you know for a fact that that's going to be good for you, you can trust that, you can believe in that, you can start mixing with it on, because you know that the moves you make are going to flatter that which you have already pre-chosen. In this particular case, that, right? So anyway, we're going to move on. We're going to get to the drums here. I start every mix with drums. I think a lot of people do. There's a pretty good reason for this. You kind of need them in the song to get a vibe. And I don't know, it's just kind of the way everyone's always done it from what I can tell. I think that setting up a good drum sound is important for a ton of reasons. One, it's inspiring. Feels good to hear good sounding drums. Two, it's important for your game staging. I feel like it's hard to get an idea of how big or small or loud or quiet the rest of your instruments are going to have to be if the drums aren't playing. And there might be people with differing opinions. I don't know. But for me, it's just how it is, right? So I'm going to tell you that these used to be MIDI. When I got the drums, they were a MIDI file. I put the MIDI file in Contact and I used a program called Modern and Massive. They have great drum sounds in there. The band had already used that in the demo. And I felt like keeping it consistent with the sound that they had in some way, shape, or form was probably a smart thing to do. I can recommend that in many cases. Another reason why it's important to listen to the song is because there are things that have been done in the creation of the song that I feel like are really important to either draw inspiration from or keep. As far as making a mix that makes the band happy, I think if you go in and you just go, hey, everything you did can off, I'm going to make it whatever I want it to be. That is when you get into these fishy, hairy situations where the band will be like, this guy doesn't know what the he's doing, or like, this guy doesn't give a shit about us or anything that we did. So it's good to keep that in mind. You know, there may be times where you're facing the choice between like, hey, I don't think this is that awesome, but the band does. So I think in those cases, you have to try and like really use your best judgment to figure out if you can make the case for changing it, or if you should just let it ride and make it the best you can, you know. And this is one of those cases. So I thought that the drums that they're already using sounded cool and they matched the vibe. So I took them and I just elevated them, as Gordon Ramsay might say. We're going to start with the kick. There's two kick channels that came out of the program. They have a kick in and a kick out. Okay. Kick in sounds like this. Okay. And the kick out sounds like this. All right, so those come out of the drum set. That's just the drum set in the program that I used. So with this kick in, I wanted it to have a little bit more pizzazz, a little bit more attitude, a little bit more spunk. So there's this plugin here. This is called Smack. It's made by Avid. It's a compressor. I really don't use it for anything other than kick drum, and only sometimes. And in this particular case, I just liked it, so... It's kind of giving it that squishy sound. You know, like there's just something about like a kick when it has like this kind of like a squishy, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's like, you know, it feels like you can hear it. It's pushing the kick down. Like it's literally the compression of something that's audible in this case. Also, it's bringing out the room of the kick a little bit of sustain. You can hear it kind of being accentuated. And overall, it just sounds good. And then I had this plugin here. So this is a weird cut, right? So like... So like the reason for this really, because I know this is probably like a strange one, but like I feel like the kick sounded kind of like small. Not small as in like this, the tone wasn't big, just small as in like physically small or something. I just felt like it was tuned high. So by pulling this down, I felt like it accentuated more of the low end because, you know, by decreasing the frequencies here, you get more of the other ones, right? Basically, by doing that, I think it just shifted the tone of the drum a little bit in a way that just I liked, you know, and like when you're mixing, everything just comes down to like taste and making decisions in the moment, and that was just one of them. Okay, so we're going to check out this kick out. Okay, so like there's a bunch of high-end content in that kick that I don't care about. When I'm doing mixes, like if there's like a particular part of a sound that I love and the rest is kind of a throwaway, I mean, I treat it as such. Like as you can see, I threw away a ton of this kick drum. And as far as this cut, is the same cut. I think that was just for continuity because you want the two tracks to kind of maintain a similar feel together. Okay, cool. So now that sounds, like how basically all I'm looking for out of this track is low end, right? And then this right here, another Pultec. I love this plugin. I can't really say enough about it. 20 hertz. I mean, that's the lowest it goes, but it affects much more than just that. And I just pulled it up a little bit. On. Send together. If I turn off the low. Cool. So what you're going to hear there is when you turn off the kick out, it sounds thin. It doesn't have that round bottom body. And when you turn it off, you're like, oh, that doesn't sound good, right? So you put it back on. If it sounds good, that means you did a good job. And that's how, I find levels too. Like I have this kick at +9 and that seems really high, but this is also a really small waveform. And I probably could have gone over here and used trim, but I didn't. Doesn't matter. Hindsight's 2020. I have that going. So then like when you're trying to get the balance of these two things, right? Like, if I turn this all the way down. There. So, just leave it there. I just wanted it to get to where you could hear it and feel it, mostly feel it, I guess is probably the right word. And then you get that blend and you're like, hell yeah, let's rock. So next kick. This is a one shot. I do this a lot. These kicks are dynamic up here, and although they are technically not real, they are round robining a lot of samples. So they're going to sound really similar to a real kit in most regards. Now, if these are live drums, I would do the exact same thing. And I made this all like that. So this can be applied to live drums as well. The only difference is like in your live kit, there would be bleed in this kick mic up here. In that scenario, typically what I would do, I would sample the kick drum that we're recording anyway, and I'd re-trigger the live kick with a sample of the kick I recorded to get rid of that bleed because I just don't like it. I don't like bleed and kick. I just don't think it's necessary. And it's the same thing with toms. I don't like it. I don't think it adds anything positive to the kit. That might be the new school me talking, but I just don't. If I can get around having it, I will every time, all the time. So, all right. So here's a one shot. After I have my dynamic live kicks, quote unquote live kicks, then I'll take these one shots. I have two of them. They both serve a purpose. This first one is a very mid-rangey attack. Sounds like this. I think I had a vendetta against that frequency when I mixed this. So it's on all of these. So yeah, so when you play all these three together, it sounds like this. Off. On. So what's going on there is that attack, although it sounds really loud and crazy probably right now without context, once you have all your other instruments, because in rock, right, we're dealing with so much mid-range. I feel like that kick sample brings out a really great mid-range quality to the kick drum that then gels with the guitars and the bass and the snare. I don't know, without it, the attack of the kick feels very, very small, very tinny, and very not exciting. This makes the kick feel a lot more defined, complex. I like a more complex kick sound, so it has like more going on across the board frequency-wise. I don't want to see a kick that like literally looks like this. Which is, I see it a lot. Obviously not this crazy, but like this kind of a kick where it's just like nothing and there's nothing going on here at all. I just don't like that. Maybe I'm just not metal enough, but that's just not for me. And this is rock, right? So we don't need to worry about that. One last thing. This is a roomy kick. I use this now exclusively, and I think like when I did this mix, I was in the transition to being able to use this exclusively, so there's probably still some old waves SSLs on here, but this is the one I use now all the time, no matter what. All I did was I add top end here, and I did it from almost 2K and up. It's a shelf, right? So just like That sounds very extreme, I know. But it'll all make sense in context later. What I'm trying to do there is just make the high end more exciting. I'm trying to make the room more obvious in the kick drum. I'll get to it later, but there's a snare sample that I use that's very roomy and bright like that too, and it makes the snare and kick cohesive. It's just part of what I do. I think in this song in particular too, especially in this verse over here, there's like a...
Oh, again, repeating my mistakes.
There's always like this part in Green Day, American Idiot, that I loved, where it's like, don't want to be an American idiot. And it just has a kick going like, duh, 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 duh. And the kick is so roomy in that part. And I always loved the way that sounded. And this, it's not as fast or anything, but I liked that you could hear the room of the kick in that part because it made it feel like more of like a band playing. Like when I shut my eyes, it felt like there was a stage with a band playing on it and I could reach into the song. You know, there's something about that. So that was like where my head was at with this room sample. I just really like it. So all together, kick drum sounds like this. Cool. All right. So we're going to talk about snare. This is the snare that came from the drum program. Okay, cool. So that sounds rad. I already like that. It's cool that there's bleed in the program. They make it so where there's bleed. That makes it feel kind of more real. And normally I would gate that, but because it's fake, the bleed is actually at a volume that is kind of unrealistic. So I don't need to gate it. It's still cool that it's there though. I think in a way it's just kind of like fun when you hear it and you're like, oh, that feels less fake, you know? And that's when you're dealing with MIDI drums, in a lot of cases anyway, I think it's probably in your best interest to do what you can to make it feel the least amount fake that you can possibly handle, but still feel modern and exciting. So I'm just going to go through some stuff here. This is what I would always do. A lot of these chains, the reasons why I just left them on is because most of them are just like saved and I just tweak them out, right? So like right now, I'm just going to go through like working on the snare, right? So like I'm going to start off with this guy right here. Cool. So that made it sound cooler. I mean, legitimately, you can use whatever word you want. It just sounds cooler. Like, you know, like I'm just looking for things to be exciting. That sounded more exciting. Okay, so this is like a plugin I always leave on. This is just a generic wood snare setting of this old Pultec EQ, the mid-range one. I could change it to the newest ones, but it just doesn't really matter because this does the job just fine. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, so this is actually bringing down the gain a little bit because what's happening here is a lot of the plugins I do, you know, I put them on and I start like getting into them. They bring up the level quite a bit. So I feel like I'm consistently tapering it back because I'm pretty heavy handed with just about everything I do. And most of the people that mix the way I gravitate towards are the same way. Okay, cool. So here's this guy. Like I said earlier, I switched to mix sub pretty much exclusively now, but you can just rock with this one for now. So basically this guy, this is, you know, just, okay, we need some high end. I actually dipped a little bit, very small amount of 3K here because it's just kind of, a lot of times when you have like the cymbal bleed behind the snare, that's like kind of crappy sounding. In this case, it's probably not totally necessary, but let's listen to it and see what we can figure out. Yeah, it just sounds cleaner. Okay, and then you have this guy. Anywhere between 3. I mean, this depends on how bright you want your snare to be, but anywhere over past 3 is great sounding. And then I have this at, I don't even know why, but I probably just like wanted to keep some of the low end mud out. There's a lot of stuff going on in sub world that you can very easily lose track of. And although it's pretty much inaudible and it's not at a very high decibel amount, it can add up and, you know, you lose headroom that way. If you want loud mixes, it's you got to maintain control over how much buildup you have in inaudible places like that. They eat up a lot of headroom and they sound bad. This is listening to the mix for a long time kind of EQ. As you can tell, as soon as I open it, you can just kind of tell. All right, let's listen to these and decide if they're even necessary, because I don't, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, I don't know. Okay, that one you can actually hear. That's cool. And then this. Every snare always has kind of like a ring. Like you have the body ring that's over here. Like it's more like around 180, 200, 220, somewhere in there. Then you always have like this second note that always happens right here. So this brings that down a little bit. What about this one? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, cool. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, those are moves that, like, if we're being completely honest with ourselves, when the whole song is playing, the whole kit's playing, everything, you would not hear those. So that's definitely a thing that happens when you solo an instrument for too long. But with that being said, it did sound better with them, so I'm going to leave it. Okay, cool. So now we just have a Neve. I'm just driving it, and then we're going to this slate thing. There's like a lot of ways to do this. I just have it like this because I haven't needed to change it in a long time, and it's fine. So there's a lot of stuff that, like, you know, you set it once and you get it right the first time, and then you just kind of leave it forever, and this is one of those cases. All right, so this is doing a lot, and you're probably thinking, like, what the hell's going on? That's doing so much. It just got crazy loud. What's going on here is honestly not much. A little bit of a low end boost and a little bit of a high end boost. It's really just making the snare it's giving like a tiny bit of a smiley face, and over here I'm just destroying it because, I mean, I just like it, I guess, you know. One of those things I was talking about is just taste. And then, like, I have this compressor here. This isn't like necessary either. Something that's tailored a little bit more towards a live snare, because what it'll do is it'll even out the hits for you. So in this case, I guess this wouldn't be totally necessary, but there's a sound that this plugin has. And when it's off, even though I don't feel like what it's doing is necessary because the drums are fake, I still just prefer to have it on. I just think it sounds better. So, I mean, I just left it. Cool. So then we got bottom snare here. So really here, we're just looking for a chain rattle. Cut out lows, cut out that mid-range compress. My friend Taylor told me about this plugin. It's kind of a trashy little shitty 1176. It just sounds good on that for some reason. This is some, I don't even remember where this came from, but it sounds good. I think this is what's doing the majority of the sound you're hearing right here. has a lot of frequency where I'm dipping it, obviously, that already exists in the other snare. I didn't really feel like it needed it, so I just pulled it out. What I was looking for here was the chain. I just wanted it to sound like the chain without having like all the other stuff going on. So I think that's just what got me here. And this is just doing a little bit of drive. This makes it a little louder, honestly. Okay, so then when you play it with this. So you hear that chain in there, right? That psst, it's awesome. I love that. That's all I really want that for. And then we got a one shot. That sounds ridiculous by itself. I know. So it's just a cool one shot. I'll include it in the stems. I just like to put it in there because it's got like a cool ring on it. It sounds really attacky. Sometimes, once again, these drums are programmed, so you don't run into all the same issues. But sometimes on programmed drums, you'll run into situations where like some of the hits don't have as strong of a transient as others. Although you're still mainly hearing that snare, having something behind it that's always hitting at 100% is favorable to building like the backbone of it sounding aggressive. Like when you're mixing, I feel like you're always playing the game, like rock music anyway, you're always playing this game of like what sounds competitive and exciting and what sounds fake, and like trying to find that perfect middle ground. I think I talked about that earlier. Basically, you're always looking for a way to make things feel exciting and hitting hard, because if you listen to like drums on a mix, if they don't feel like they're hitting hard, the song's not going to feel like it's hitting hard. And the reality is that like there are many drummers who aren't hitting the drums that hard every hit of every part of the song. And obviously there are scenarios where you don't want that, but in a song like this, you do. Unfortunately, there wasn't a real drum, so I just got to make that the case. That's how this went down. All right, so the next thing we have is a snare reverb. I use Trigger because I just have a set of these. Instead of using the actual reverb, it's like an actual room sample. So I'm just bringing out attack and sustain again. Cool. And then here, I'm just getting rid of shit I don't want. It's crazy because drums, I feel like when you're soloing them, they always seem like they're too bright until you hear in context and you're like, oh, no, that's right. So like in this case, I brought up a bunch because like, as you can see, this tapers down pretty hard over here. So I just brought this up. I want it to be a little bit brighter, a little snazzier. Back to that kick shot, one shot from earlier, this one. I want the high ends to be similar on those. So yeah, and then this, 700, I just didn't really feel like we needed it. And then you don't need any of this because we already have plenty of body in the snare. All our snares and kicks together, we're gonna up with this. Cool. So you got theirs, you have a strong attack, strong transients. It sounds exciting, it sounds cool, but like it's, there's still a lot to go. Toms. Okay, cool. So there's barely any in the song really. So like, this is, I just have like this gate here. Normally what I do is I'd actually cut the toms myself, but since they're programmed, I didn't really feel like I had to. I just threw it on there. It kind of brought it back a little bit. And then, like here, we're kind of just boosting some frequencies that sounded good. It's really not doing a lot. You get the idea. You're just looking to brighten it up. If you're like hearing something in it that sounds unfavorable, you can dip it out. Same thing with this guy. I use Pro Q on this one, but let's see. That. Oh, yeah, that's like kind of a weird ring in the drum. That just makes it feel cleaner. So, yeah. So, huge important thing here. Overheads. This song is cool. The overheads are mostly ride and I think hat. So, in a lot of songs, you'll get like this annoying amount of crash happening and there's a lot more to deal with. In this song, it was kind of a different scenario. All right, so here, just brightening it up. A lot. Yeah, that's cool. And then yeah, that's it. Just trying to bring out that ping of the ride and just have it sound good. And then what we got here, I bet we don't even need this, honestly, but let's see. Okay, so all this is doing is, in cymbals, as you know, there's a billion nodes. And realistically, I did not mix the song first. I mixed one of the other ones with tons of crashes first, and these are probably lots of crash-related frequency spikes that are happening. And because I keep the drums the same in on records, like as far as the mix channels go, with there's small variances, but not tons. I just left this in place. So yeah, it sounds fine. I like it. It makes it feel a little bit less offensive. All right, cool. So we got this 1176. I think a lot of people use this. This is great. This just got some vibes, some character. Two, also dual mono mode here. So you're not like you're not compressing it in stereo, so like that way if there's a huge hit on one side, it's not squashing the right side with the left side or vice versa. It's just kind of doing it separately. I feel like that sounds better. All right, and then one of my favorite plugins, Soothe. I actually have Soothe 2 now, so if we want we can actually switch it out. Soothe is awesome, but Soothe 2 is even better. They did some upgrades here. Basically, what we're trying to do here is just get rid of annoying stuff. And actually, they have all kinds of great presets in here now for that. Matte cymbals, that one's probably fine. Drum room harsh, whatever. Let's just start with this one. Let's see what this sounds like, and we can maybe tailor it. Okay, I like that. There was this thing happening every time the crash hit, like as the crash was decaying. It was happening somewhere. If I turn it off, I can show you what I was hearing, why I made the move I just made. That was what I was hearing. Obviously in cymbals, there's a billion things that are going on that you could solo out and find to be harsh or offensive or whatever. But I think it's picking the ones that will really make the biggest difference in the long run. And that happened to be the case this time with that. So that's why I went with that one. All right, so rooms. That's fine. Now all I can hear is a 3.6K frequency. It's like killing me. All right, so these rooms already sound really cool. Oh, and there's that room reverb fret. So I put on this reverb. Is that right here? You can really hear where that kick is playing. That's what I was talking about earlier. I wanted that Green Day vibe, right there. Really brings that out. It's cool. So, I mean, you don't need tons. I basically turn it up till I can hear it and it's noticeable, and then turn it down just a little bit. All right, cool. So in here, we'll EQ high end 10K, boost it a little bit, 4.5, boost it, 1 dB. That's, you're barely going to hear that on this plugin. A little bit of mid range in this case. I don't know. I was just feeling it, I guess. And then I got a ton of low end boost here, but I'm also cutting it. So what's happening is you're making this big high shelf, but then you're cutting it too. So like what's happening is even though I'm cutting it all the way up to 140, it still makes the bottom end feel larger than if I just cut it anyway, because of the slope. And the reason I did that is because I had enough low end in my kick already from what I did, the moves I made and the samples I chose. I didn't really feel that I needed to add more low end, especially that sub area low end to the kick drum with the room. And to get them as loud as I wanted them to be, I would have been too much. So left it at that. Cool. All right. And then compress. This is totally a matter of taste and opinion. You can do whatever you want with this, but in my case, I like to rock my room setting. I think like when I very first started making music, I was like, what you use on rooms? And it was like, rock my room. And I'm like, cool. And I don't think I've really messed with it ever since. So there's that. I know people like decapitators and other shit like that. There's a lot of stuff. And oh, there we go. 3.6. That frequency I was talking about, I clearly already knew what was going on before. So continuity, that's good signs. All right, cool. So get rid of that. So now let's just play our drums together. We're going to hear our drums. We're going to be like, yay. All right, cool. They're bright, which is what I was looking for, because it's just the kind of song it is. You know, they got a lot of body. They have a lot of depth. The rooms are really colorful. It really puts you in a place. I really want to hear music and feel like I'm in a place hearing it. And it's really roomy sounding right now, but that's good because every time we add more to the mix, that amount of room that you're actually hearing will go down a lot, unfortunately. Sometimes I fight with that, but yeah, so there you go. That's the drums. What we're going to do now is we're going to look at this bass here. There's 2 DIs. Okay, so the DI sounds like this. So what's fun about this is that's actually from MIDI, believe it or not. I printed down the bass with this program that I have called Inferno Bass, the DI of it. It's a Dingwall bass. I love Dingwall basses. I'm going to take this DI and make it awesome. So really all you need to do here is, okay, so I always compress the DI first. Okay, that just kind of smooths it over. Back to like, you know, having an idea of what you're going for and all that crap we were talking about earlier. When I first did this, I was, you know, there's a lot of different ways you can process bass these days. But when I first heard this, I was like, you know, I think that like that classic Ampeg bass sound is going to be awesome in some way or another. So I pulled up this UA plugin and threw it on. Cool, and it sounds like an Ampeg, which is great. That's what we wanted. All right, got this. So this is just cutting out bullshit. I mean, you know, you might want it, you might not. This isn't going to do a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but this 300 here, I find myself cutting that a lot in general. Like a lot of things just tend to really build up there. It sounds like shit sometimes, so... All right, here's a setting my friend told me about. It's low end. All you're doing here is you're compressing the low end and then you're gaining it up. So you're making it smoother and more even and then replacing the low end lost, the gain lost in the compression afterwards. And then this is our bass. This makes more low end. at 80. Mostly mix my bass above my kick. There's times where I don't, but because it's the case, I feel like 80 is a good place to just kind of go for that. And then this is a compressor that my buddy told me about that I've always used on bass my whole career. So I've just, another one of those things, you know, if it works, it works. There's no reason to go looking for a million different ways to do the same thing. Like, it gets you the same point. And what's going on there is like, we're really just looking for it to be like crazy pinned. And in here, I'm just cutting off the sub of the bass that we don't really need because that's where the kick's gonna live. And then here we have the same 300 thing. I just cleans it up a little bit. All right, so you got this cool Ampeg tone here. And what we can do is play with the drums and just kind of feel the thing. Okay, cool. So you're probably thinking like, oh, that's kind of quiet and or it's too dull. So that is what's up. Well, I mean, it's not bright enough, right? The low end is solid. There's enough low end. We got that under control. So what I usually do is I split my bass because I wanted kind of like a little bit more colorful, aggressive kind of thing to give you the presence of the bass guitar. So same thing. I just copied over the same thing so it compresses the DI the same. But then after that, we went with this guy, and you kind of get this. And then the same. Okay. Yeah, so what's going on here is I picked a very conservative amount of distortion for this song. This song, I usually would have more drive, but this song, I don't know, it didn't need it. I didn't want it to sound out of place, you know, like once again, having the vision, like the song, you don't want some psycho metal bass or this, so I use this vintage one. I just turned the drive up a little bit. And it's cool, right? And then I just left this the same as a copy over. And then this, I just pulled the low end way up. And then this over here, this on bass, you just get these razor blade things going on over here that just really hurt my ears sometimes. So I just got rid of that a little bit. So basically, then you play with the other bass track. Right? So that makes it like way more like punk, like, you know, it's in your face, like kind of grimy, but cool. You know, it's not like out of control, but it's like, it's got some dirt, it's got some grit, and it has attitude now. And you're like, yes, now. Right? I mean, that is all the difference in the world there. And now it's starting to make sense. Like, you know, the high end of the drums that to me, even at first started to feel kind of bright, now makes sense. Now I'm listening to this bass. I'm like, oh, right, okay. And, you know, as you add more stuff, you know, if you didn't already know this in advance, you could probably find yourself going back to square one again, readjusting your EQs on your drums, because as you add more things, you'll realize like, oh, shit, like these need to be brighter. They're not cutting, blah, blah, blah. Now I just know because I've done it so many times, you start to memorize like what the necessary amount is of everything. All right, so guitar, we have this main rhythm track here. It's a stereo track now. It used to be 2 mono DIs. What I did for this is I reamped them through my Kemper using a Marshall JMP. All right, cool. So that's a cool tone. I mean, I picked it because it really just had like this cool vibe to it. It had balls. I love the old Marshall GMP sound. It's not like overly gainy. It's not like super low endy. I mean, it sounds like guitar. And in a song like this, like I think like a really clear tone that isn't full of like insane amounts of like fuzz and bullshit is like really the way to go. I mean, especially when you're like thinking about this part and stuff. Like those could have easily sounded ridiculous if there's too much gain in context of the song, you know? It just, back to that vision thing, it's really important to make sure that you're keeping these things in mind, especially if you are given the opportunity to pick tones, which I was in this case, right? So the first thing we're going to do is pull up this EQ. This is a Trident A range. I think this thing sounds awesome. I'll just put everything back to null really quick and then we'll do it again. I picked 3K, 8K for the top end, and then 500 and 150. Like I said, it's not like rock science or anything. Like these are all like 3, 6, 3, 3, everything. You know what I mean? Like you can tell, like when you start to pull it too far, this particular EQ, like when you start to drag any one of those things too far, it just automatically starts sounding wrong, right? I mean, you could hear it when I was doing it. When it pulled it too far, it'd be like, oh no, that's wrong. The balance is off. The balance is off. Like it's a really easy thing to tell. That's why I like this EQ. It sounds good, man. It's funny because like I never know or see people using this, and I don't even remember how I got to this. I think I was just like pulling random things one day and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. If I don't use that, I would use an SSL, and I think most people do. All right, cool. So this is random, you know, probably makes a difference, but might not. Let's see. Oh, let's go to the chord part. Let's play better. Yeah, those are just like little things. I mean, they help, but 400 in guitar is something you'll probably find yourself wanting to get rid of pretty frequently. There's a lot of like, oh, I don't know. It makes the guitars feel wider when that doesn't exist as much. It's just adding a little bit of vibe. Okay, this plugin's dope. This is an LA3A made by Apogee. I love all their stuff. This one in particular is really good. Okay, so what's happening there? For me, the guitars feel like they're being pushed to the sides more the farther I bring this up. And also, it's taming the high end the more I bring this up. So somewhere around there, you know, I'm just trying to get it to where the guitars feel like they're like kind of locked in place, but it's not like anything psychotic. It's just a little bit. And then bam, here we go. And that's the one. This is for width. This is totally optional. If you don't like your guitars to feel super wide, then don't use this. All right, so let's hear this with the bass and the drums. Right? So everything's starting to make sense now. The amount of room in the drums, how bright everything sounds. Now that you're getting this part, it's all starting to like come together, right? Like it's feeling cohesive, like all this stuff makes sense. So now we just have like other little guitar things. Like this track's feedback. Like I didn't do anything with this, honestly. I just left it. It's feedback, you know? It's cool. You just put it in and turn it up until the vibe's right. We'll check this guy out. Okay. This is a guitar solo. We'll come back to that. Leads. Okay, so the song starts off with this lead. All right, so these are, I don't even know what the hell these tones are from anymore, but I made them with something. So they're super dark and muddy. That brightens them up a lot. But then, I got a lot of gain there. Okay, and then soothe. These are super 4K heavy. And if you see when this is playing, like when soothe, because what soothe does, I guess I didn't explain that earlier, is it's a dynamic frequency EQ where there's natural spikes in the audio. This is actually dipping them for you in real time, so you don't have this static EQ curve. It's actually changing all the time, and it's awesome. But as you can see, we have that crazy amount of 4K in this guitar, and then they were still muddy. Got rid of that. And then over here, yeah, in the mastered released version, I still notice that guitar is a little 4K heavy sometimes, but I'm also like overanalyzing it probably, and there's a lot of guitars and a lot of songs that sound that way, so I don't get too concerned about it, but you just want to make sure you're not like tormenting your listeners' ears sometimes. That can get kind of crazy. So in this situation, like now that I have like the guitar set up with like the rhythm, the bass, and the drums, I just go through all these extra guitars, find the balance, like where's a place where they're playing together? Right here. So in this case, I might like listen to it like this. I mean, I may have changed the level of the guitar from what my mix was, but I wanted to hear this lead a little bit more now that I'm coming back to it. And instead of like just boosting the volume, you can actually just find a place where the guitar accentuates what's actually being played and boost that instead. So I'm getting 2 more dB of the guitar, but it's only the part of the guitar that like is really shining through to me while the other guitar is playing. So if you do that, it will save you on headroom and stuff, because that way you're not like turning up all the frequencies of this lead, because you can't hear a lot of them in context while everything's playing. So just turn up the part that you can hear the most, and that will get you there quicker. There's a little guitar here. I mean, this is just an act of balancing. Nothing to do there. Let's just turn it up until you like it, Woohoo. There's this over here. There's just like a little like filtered out kind of deal. And then let's see what we had for plugins. All right, cool. So what's going on here? Not a whole lot. Oh, actually, I was wrong. We were going for like this Green Day vibe here. So I wanted to cut all the low end out. So I did, as you can see, and a lot of the high end. So basically you're making like a telephone filter kind of effect with this EQ, bringing up this 800 right there, and then cutting the shit out of the lows and highs. Okay, here's a little trick. I love this thing. I use this all the time. Little tube amp. This is one of the settings I really like. It's a little hot, you hear a little bit of crack on it, but I don't mind. I think it's kind of cool. And then a little spring reverb. I don't use this often, but this is a good place to use it. Yep. And then another soothe. I use this on guitars a lot, and be honest, because they all sound extremely annoying and in their own respective places. It's like, what part of the guitar is going to be annoying? That's how you define the guitarist's personality. It's not doing a lot, but like I think when you go through and you put the time into making sure that you're getting rid of offensive frequencies in as many places as you can, it adds up quick. And then when everything's playing together, you're not going to run into those situations where you have like ultra annoying buildups everywhere of stuff that then you're trying to fix in a master later. Like, oh God, there's so much 4K. There's so much of this, just like make every instrument like kind of like the parts that sound good, make them come out and shine, and then you'll be stoked. Okay, so let's get to the solo. All right, that's my friend Andy's guitar plugin he made. It's on the factory default setting, and it just sounded good that way. That's just how it goes sometimes. So actually, this was an interesting section here because there are 4 layers of the solo. And normally on a solo, I would just be like, hell yeah, take the guitar, throw a stereo delay on it, and then maybe like a stereo reverb, make it huge. But in this case, because there's so many just stacks of it, I took this one. You can see it's panned a little to the left, but not really. And then there's this one and this one, which are stereo. And then this is on top. Yeah, so that's a little bit different than I'm used to, but that was cool. That, in that case, like I decided not to use a big reverb or delay or anything because there's so many layers that there was a natural chorusing happening already. And it was obviously wide because, it's pan stereo and then there's like all these different layers and there's the harmony. I just didn't feel like it needed anything else. This will happen sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes less is more. This is a perfect example of why. Although what was given to me is not less, what I can do with what was given to me can be less and be good because of that. And there we go. Let's listen to that in context just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. All right, cool. So yeah, it sounds great. As you can hear, everything's working together well. This is cool. I like this track a lot because even though I don't have it set in a way to where it's extremely noticeable, it makes the guitars feel a lot more three-dimensional. It's adding a different frequency set, being accentuated anyway, to the rhythms. And since it's playing extra chords and stuff, it just makes the guitar feel a lot more complex. Even though the song's very simple, it's a nice addition. So I just brought that up until it made the guitars feel bigger. That's more of a preference of like taste. Like sometimes some people might be like, oh, that's like a lead, I want to hear it the whole way through. But in this case, it just seemed to serve the purpose the best that way. Also, let's listen to this crunch part really quick as it comes in so you can kind of hear that. That thing, we cut out a lot, right? We really telephoned the hell out of it, but it worked out perfectly. I think like the drastic change, the dynamic change that you hear happening there is really cool. It's what I am always looking for. It really served the purpose well. And that kind of stuff, like you can't overdo it. It's pretty hard to overdo it when you're looking for something like that. Because like you really want like the last chorus to come in feeling explosive. So like by bringing it back to like that, and then you have those huge drums come in on top of that tiny guitar, like that juxtaposition is really fucking cool. There's just a lot to be said about like how that dynamic contrast really works in your favor. So last, but certainly not least, we're going to do the vocals. In vocals, principally, I do everything about the same. It's always more or less the same idea. There's a lot of ways that people do it I've seen, but mine is I just basically always have a separate dedicated track for just about everything for the most part, at least to a degree. Some people use like a bunch of buses and stuff. I don't. I have one. I send all my vocals to this one bus. We can talk about this bus really quick. This thing again. This is just cutting out some shit. I set this one day I want to say like 2 years ago. And I legit have actually all these plugins. I've never touched these plugins since I decided what they should be. And it's been a long time. This plugin exists here for when I get vocals that are darker than my own. Because I use a Sony C800. It's a pretty bright mic. I don't need this on my own vocals, but because I am so used to mixing my own vocals, I like when others' vocals sound like that too. So this is kind of like a quick solution to getting things to where I'm used to hearing them. This is typically turned off, but it's there all the time just in case. I hate having to open a million plugins all the time. This is just barely doing anything, honestly. This is like really just to prevent anything from jumping out of the mix too much, because sometimes that will happen, and this is just like keeping it down.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate a pop.
This thing will never go past 3. I'd be surprised if it even got there. Like I said, this is just like a final touch. Every other vocal is already being compressed a lot. I could not have this on, probably wouldn't matter. This is kind of like a safeguard. Okay, and then this. Once again, I like this plugin. This is some preset in here, DS Master. I probably didn't even touch it, honestly. And this isn't doing that much, but it's just nice. All right, cool. So we have a verb. And then we have a delay. Reverb is this thing. I've never changed this in my life. So I don't even remember why it is this. This is like barely even noticeable. It's just kind of a small room. It barely adds much to it at all, but it's there. And then this, I use this most of the time. There's other ones I mess with sometimes, but I feel myself always gravitating back towards this. I don't know if I don't want to say there's anything necessarily special about this, but I do think that it just sounds really good. You can do a lot with this plugin too, honestly. And when I'm in the mood to be like ultra creative with something weird, I can get some crazy stuff with this, and it's really fun. In this case, like a quarter note delay was fine. I was like, yep, that's great. And then I just have a doubler here. I use all different versions of this, but in this case, I used, I guess, pensato vocal, but I changed it, so I don't know what I did. But really, this isn't crazy. You just want it to sound like that sound. So, I mean, just like turn it on and then turn it up until it sounds that way. And I only use it on choruses, really. So we're going to start the verse here. So like on a vocal like this.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate apologies, happiness not guaranteed. Trying to make peace with my past, but it's my enemy.
All right, so, I mean, I'm going to put this on it. My friend told me about this years ago. I've always used it since. This thing is, like, honestly pretty badass. That I can turn this high end way up if I want that, like, Justin Bieber. Like, I can hear the inside of your throat sound. And it never sounds, like, harsh to me. It's just really good. This isn't doing a lot, but it's a good place to start. You know, it's just, I guess it's doing what most of my stuff is doing, where it's like dipping out in a shitty area and kind of accentuating the high end. This is a plugin that, well, it's Pro Q3. I use it a lot, but I always leave this inserted on my vocal chain as a second plugin here, because the next one is a compressor. So what I'm looking for here, and I just leave it set to where I just move these around, but basically what I'm doing is I'm dynamically EQing parts of the voice based on the person and the range of what they're singing that sound non-complimentary. And this is like really up to taste. You know, it's not doing crazy amounts of stuff, but it does help.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes.
So like in this case,
Trust that it. There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. And
this is something that is optional, and I didn't start doing it until about a year ago. But I will say that when you take the time, and it helps if you listen to the vocal really loud, when you take the time to find the spots that can be messed with a little bit, it can really make a singer go from sounding good to great. You know, we're all born with our voices sounding the way they sound. I happen to hate the way my voice sounds, but, you know, and depending on the mic and everything, like certain parts of their voice might get brought out too much, and it can just be fixed a little bit. And that's how I do it. And then after that, I compress it. So now those cuts that I just made will be accentuated even more.
there I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break.
And then this, I don't remember why I had this, because I think that was already tuned, but I think maybe it was just like a question of I like the way this plugin sounds. I use that plugin load. I'm not going to lie. Even when it's not doing much at all, I just like the way it sounds. It's just, it gives a little bit of like a modern feel. All right, this is just compressing more.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate apology.
So here's this thing again. Now the vocals are like really distorted, right? I mean, it sounds like...
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break.
But I like that. Turn these verbs and delays on.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate apologies, happiness not guaranteed.
So like all that mouth sound stuff and all that, I mean, you could get like crazy and try and get in there and get rid of it, but it's a rock song. You know, if I was doing like a pop song or something, I guess that would be different. But I just don't think it matters, man. Like rock is loud, rock's aggressive, rock's full of attitude. So I just let it roll in that case. You know, like all that stuff is what makes it feel rock to me. So double is the same thing. I just don't have that plug-in at the end. I just bring up the double. I don't want the same volume because that's like an actual effect. The double is more for this particular application. For me, it's more of a reinforcement. So it'll sound like this.
There I go again, repeating my mistakes. You give your heart to me with trust that it won't break. Anticipate apologies, happiness not guaranteed. Trying to make peace with my past, but it's my enemy.
Cool. And then right here, the verse continues on, right? And there's a bit of an overlap. So what I do is I duplicate my tracks, make more. Crazy, right? Okay, cool. So then like we have some harmonies here. I'm going to be honest with you. In this song, I process just about every vocal in the whole song the same way. So what this was is just a matter of leveling and deciding like how loud things would be and where they'd be panned, and that's about it. So let's check this out.
Refuse to speak with me and can't look in my eyes. When you see someone staring back that you don't recognize, has covered my face, I feel so out of place. But you're still by my side to catch me when I fall from grace. Hate shall sing.
Okay. So I'm sure you heard a huge difference between the way these vocals sound and the way these vocals sound. These are my chorus vocals, so now we're getting into a different vibe. The processing is still the same, but the leveling and the panning is different. So like here, we have this main vocal up pretty high, and then I have the doubles turned up pretty high too, and then we have a doubler on the main vocal. So if you listen to the main vocal right here...
I'm not always gonna be all that you expect from me. Whether I rise or fall, you'll be with me through it all.
It's got that doubler sound I was talking about.
I'm not always gonna be.
Is without it.
I'm not always gonna be.
Is with it.
I'm not always gonna be.
Cool. And then you bring in these doubles on the sides.
I'm not always gonna be all that you expect from me. Whether I rise or fall, you'll be with me through it all.
Now, that sounds like a wall of vocals, and that's something that I am all about, and a lot of people that know my stuff know them all about. It's really just something I always do. And then here we go. We have these harmonies.
I'm not always gonna be.
And these are the same EQ too. I actually used to fuck with the EQ and change it all and everything, but then like in my head I was like, why would I do that? And I realized in that moment that I think through good editing, I can achieve a better sound by making all the EQs the same. That way the vocals are more cohesive. There are exceptions to this, but for the most part, I EQ all the vocals to sound the same. And then like if there's really bad S's and stuff, I'll just delete them out of the doubles and the harmonies and stuff. But I'd rather the whole vocal maintain a similar sound that's cohesive throughout everything. Ever since I started doing that, they started sounding even better. We're going to move on. There's these woes that happen in the chorus. So what I got initially was like 8 tracks of woes, and I just sent them down to an aux and printed them as one stereo file right here. Right? It's a bunch of people saying whoa, right? Okay, so this is like a common thing I do on backup vocals. It's just kind of like I don't need the low end because they're going to be in stereo. That's part of the reason. But also, I just like at this point, I just don't think you're going to hear under 100 hertz of people going, whoa, in the context of this whole song. And I'm probably right. So, and here, this is optional. This is just kind of like cleans it up a little bit. I think you have a lot of other stuff happening here. So like this will kind of get it out of the way and then just bring it up here. This, let me see. This isn't necessary. This is a taste thing. I think I just didn't really like that frequency that day. It sounds better with it, I think, but it's not like a huge deal. If that wasn't there, no one would have cared. There's definitely plenty of scenarios where if a dip like this didn't exist in the song, it would still be just as good, or the mix would still be just as good. This is one of those. Here's the thing I always use on backup vocals. It's the Fairchild. This is the UA plug. I think I made this a very long time ago. Let's turn it on and see what it sounds like. Or we'll start with this. That's where we were. Turn it on. Cool. So what happened there is it felt like obviously more compressed, right? But it also kind of scooped it a little bit and made it wider. So, and that's good for this application here. Here we are at this guy again. I think I use a preset. Nothing wrong with that. Sometimes when you're just mixing and you're going through the motions and it's just happening, and because I mean I mix fast. I probably did this whole mix in an hour and a half, so at least initially. And you're going fast, you just pull shit, and if it sounds good, just leave it. This is one of those things. I pulled it up and I was like, yep, sounds good. Cool. And then this I use all the time. This is just adding depth. Right? I love that tail. This thing sounds so good. All the modes. For this one I use that 80s one, but check it out in the song. All right, cool. That's great. And then there's this last one. This was like a lead. I didn't use a lot of this, but initially this aux right here, I think I made that for this group of woes, and I had this in there with it. And I think what happened is I bounced them all down without this and just left this going to that aux. So it still had the same reverb and all that crap on it, but it was a single iteration of the woes. So when it plays with it, it just gives it a single voice too. It's not hugely important. It's just a small little thing in the song. Listen to the whole chorus, kind of get an idea. We're going to see this is our main vocal, sorry, the pink, and then use the doubles that we were talking about that makes it wide. These are the harmonies that are just kind of in there, and then these are our woes. So we'll just kind of see and listen.
Hey, Chelsea! Sometimes I wonder how we ever made it this long. All the hurt I've ever caused you can't help but remember, but I can't help myself. Sometimes I lose my temper. Hey Chelsea, I'm not always gonna be all that you expect from me.
So, I mean, as you can see, like once you get it set up, I mean, the way the song is, you know, it's like you have a verse with an A section and a B section, and then you have a chorus, and there's not a lot of tracks. So once you get like your level set and you get your delays and everything, I mean, it kind of mixes itself in a lot of ways, you know, like there might be parts where like you need to automate a word up or down, or, I mean, there was a lot of editing that I did prior to this section or to this part, right? And you're not going to have to worry about that. I did it all, and you're not going to have to worry about doing any of it. But now that we're at the post editing stage, and it's like a different kind of editing. It's like editing for my mix, like what I'm looking for, etc. It's really just about getting it on tracks that sound good and leveling it. That's what I did here. And I know it's probably not that exciting, but it's really just about it sounding really great, right? And I mean, when I play it back, the vocals are captivating. They're in my face. They're exciting. They do what vocals need to do, right? So let's check out this bridge. This is probably the only part of the song where like vocals are layered. We got these mains here, and then we got harmonies going through the whole time, and we got something else here too. So let's check this out. Yeah, so This is another thing where like a lot of times like this kind of a section, I would probably send these to a bus like this one right here and have it like super reverb and everything.
The more I promise you, the more I let you down. I'll let you down. I can't meet great expectations.
I think in this case, I just didn't want to because the song just didn't feel that way to me. Like, I feel like when you start like with the woes, when you add like a bunch of reverb and stuff like that, you start getting more into like the epic category, like a 30 Seconds to Mars or something like that. And, I don't know, like in my head, I was thinking more like the singer singing in the mic and then like another guy coming up to him, like with his back to him, singing whoa into the same mic with them or something. You know, it just wouldn't have like this crazy larger than life, like epic arena vibe to it. It feels more intimate this way. So that's why I left it. I mean, that's just a matter of taste. You know, you can do whatever you want with that, but it's just the way I heard it. And I think it worked out pretty good. Now let's check out what we got. Yeah. So as you can see with a song like this, back to what I was saying earlier, it's really just about getting the vision, what you want it to sound like. And in this case, I was like, you know, somewhere between Green Day, Rise Against, Blank, something like that, you know, with some modern put into it. And then executing your tones to match that. So like, you know, in this case, it was really easy to get a strong backbone because the drums are programmed. So I didn't have to deal with a bunch of dynamic issues or sloppy playing or bad editing or anything like that. The bass is also programmed. So it had a perfect low end the whole time. I never had to mess with and have to worry about there being weird dynamic issues with the bass really either. So like that already knocks out a crazy amount of work that you might have to consider as a mixer immediately. So that's pretty cool. Really easy. So like, you know, it's more just about taste. Like, what do I want? What kind of bass tone do I want? What kind of drums? Guitars or rhythm guitars or Marshalls or they're big Marshall guitars, right? I mean, it's not rocket science. It's cool. This kind of a mix is fun. You know, it gives you a lot of room to kind of just like breathe life into things that maybe aren't like hugely showcased. Some of the more modern kind of music we hear that's like full synths and programming and all this stuff. It's more of like a classic take at a song. And a song can only work like this if it's written really well. So props to my boys that wrote this song. But I think that about does it. Normally, I think we would probably have questions that I could answer about stuff. So I hope that I gave a pretty clear explanation of why and how everything was done. And I hope that when you mix the song, you have as much fun as I did. Thanks for checking this out and party on, man. See ya.